Hello and welcome back to Cage of Roses. Last time we ended still in what looks very much like a prison cell, but let's see if we can finally end this night today. Micah and Henny sat in their cell for what could have been minutes or hours or even days, whiling away the time. By God, there was so much time, with continued unending, incessant games of Joker. Micah's heart was not in the game, her head being otherwise occupied, and Henny trounced her soundly 12-1. Henny was better than Micah at card games in general, so this came as little surprise. Micah was accustomed to losing, and accepted her failures with good grace. There were more important things in life than card games. And in any event, Micah had never cared for the jokers in Henny's deck. She preferred to be rid of them. Little of note happened during these dead, empty hours. Nobody came to visit Henny and Micah in their cell, and the faint screams both women had heard, though Micah was staunchly determined to think of it as the wind, did not see fit to impinge upon their solitude. The sky beyond their prison cell, meanwhile, remained dark, like a bereaved widow outfitted in mourning clothes. The cold remained oppressive, the stone floor uncomfortable, and Micah found little in the way of relief, no matter how much she shifted. Micah had just begun to wonder, in a detached way, as Henny launched into their 14th round of Joker, whether they would ever meet their rescuer. Perhaps whoever had hauled them from the forest had done so, not as an act of kindness, but as a means of prolonging their suffering. Maybe they meant to keep them locked in the cell, alone, until time itself slowed to a trickle, then ceased, the squalid stone walls tumbling down about them to crush their emaciated corpses in the debris. But soon, shockingly soon, or so it seemed, despite all of the interminable waiting, Micah found her hypothesis proved wrong. She could hear, above the sound of Henny shuffling the deck, a sound. Footsteps. The footsteps were soft enough at first that Micah wondered whether she had imagined them, but as the seconds elapsed, they became louder still, until even Henny heard them. Goodness me! Henny fumbled with the cards, then threw them down, face up, red hearts and black spades spilled across the stone. Can you hear that, Micah? Yes, I can. Somebody must be coming. Our rescuer from the woods, do you think? They could be our rescuer, yes, but maybe... Micah did not finish this thought. Her saliva felt too thick in her throat, like tar, and she shivered. She did not want to extinguish the hope which she could see flickering now in Henny's eyes. That would have been cruel. Henny's head swiveled to the grated iron door, excitable as a puppy, and wide-eyed she peered through the shadows. This is a turn for the better. I was beginning to worry they'd forgotten all about us. I can't wait to come face to face with them. I'll be sure to tell them exactly what I think about their so-called hospitality. You've said that once before, Henny, and I wish you wouldn't. I don't want to anger them. Oh, stuff and nonsense. I'm sure it will be fine. If they wanted to harm us, they had plenty of chances to do it already, surely. That is true, but... The footsteps drew closer still, echoing about the stone walls, echoing too inside Micah's skull. The footsteps could represent only two things. They would mean salvation if they were lucky, but Heike found it difficult to believe this. Neither she nor Henny had been very lucky that night, despite Henny's continued winning hands and joker. It seemed far more likely that these footsteps would bring about yet more suffering, and sure enough. Well, well, would you look what the cat dragged in? The voice that cut through Mike's musings was a proud, haughty one, the syllables polished to perfection like cut glass. The voice belonged, quite obviously, to a woman, and, given her pronunciation, she must have been well-bred. I'll do my best. Perhaps the rescuer, too, was a lady, a von such and such as Micah was, from a family whose ancestral home was vast and old and grand enough to have its very own dungeon. Whereas most nobility used their subterranean storage spaces for wine cellars, this family seemed to prefer taking prisoners. The thought did not fill Micah with much confidence about her mysterious rescuer. Anxiously, she glanced up to meet the source of said voice, and when she did... Oh. Micah could not help but gasp in surprise. The owner of the voice, who now stood upon the opposite side of the cell's door, was not at all what Micah had imagined. She was shorter than Micah had expected, shorter than Micah herself, who was dwarfed by her wealthier, significantly older fiancé, and slender with it, her cheekbones high, her neck not dissimilar to the stem of a flower. Her skin was frighteningly pale, like that of a corpse, and beneath her eyes Micah could see dark rings similar to those she often sported during the long nights at her bedroom window, unable to sleep. The woman, or was she a girl, had hair so fair it was almost white, which almost seemed to glow in the moon's light. Her hair was not worn, as most women did, in a chignon, but instead was loose. It tumbled about her shoulders on waves, all disarrayed, in a manner which would have made Micah's mother swoon from the sheer impropriety of it all. The girl's appearance, but was she a girl, was striking not only because of her indeterminable age, but because of her eyes, widely spaced and fringed with the most luxurious of lashes. Her irises were not brown like Henny's, nor blue like Micah's. They were not green, nor hazel, nor grey, nor any of the other shades Micah had seen in the faces of her family's servants and the attendants at the boutiques to which her mother took her, and the congregation of her local parish. Her irises were, instead, bright red, so much so they bordered on the visceral. These lovely irises were even redder than the blood which had seeped from Micah's sliced cheek, which had now congealed and seemed full of violence. The girl was a perfect stranger to Micah, but her eyes told more than pleasant chit-chat ever could. She was not normal. Micah knew instinctively, as she gazed upon her, that she should keep her distance if she could, but this only made her, conversely, feel even more enchanted. She could not look away from her. It was as though her captor had placed her under a spell. That woman... Henny shifted back, her skirts shifting against the ground. She's the one I told you about, Micah, the one from the woods. She's the one who fought off those bandits. I thought it was unbelievable what I saw, but now I know it wasn't a dream. She really is real. killed all those men. She's a monster. A monster? Micah murmured this under her breath, her expression one of perplexity. Had Henny delivered this indictment against any other, Micah would have thought her guilty of exaggeration, but she could believe such a claim easily enough when leveled at this woman. The woman did not look as monsters did in fairy tales, with slobbering maws and sharpened claws, but her red eyes make Micah's blood run cold regardless. She was no ordinary woman, but perhaps that was to be expected. Nothing about the night's events had been ordinary. Oh, a monster, am I? The woman's unnatural eyes narrowed and, with a smile, said, "You cut me to the quick, you humans do. At least you would, were I not so accustomed to it. Perhaps I bring it upon myself, given the unusual manner in which I treat my guests, but you could at least try to be polite. Why, if it were not for me, the both of you would be lying in the woods right now, mangled beyond all recognition." "So you really were the one who saved us? I thought as much. Yours isn't a face anybody could forget in a hurry." "Why, thank you. I will take that as a compliment. I am very striking, I know." "Why did you save us, though? And how? I can't believe you brought us back here, wherever he is, on your own. You must have had help." "Oh, if only, but alas, I've not had any help for, well, let's see. It must have been a century at least." "A century?" Henny gawked at the woman, her eyes agog. "But that would make you older than my grandmother. Can't be right? You don't look a day over 18. "Oh, do you really think so? You're too kind." Laughing softly, the woman extricated a key from her pocket, then inserted it into the awaiting keyhole. Deftly she turned it, and deftly she stepped inside the cell, the hem of her dark cape dragging against the uneven stone floor. Once inside the cell, she turned to pull the door open and locked it anew. There, that ought to do it. It would be horribly tedious if you tried to run from me. I would be able to catch you, of course, but I'd rather not bother with all of the fuss. It's such a hassle. With the door thusly secured, she placed the key inside her pocket and turned to look at her prisoners, for that, Micah knew, with a sinking feeling, was what she was. Micah had been aware of her status upon waking in her dank prison cell, but the presence of the woman and how very aloof she was made this abundantly clear. She had not been brought back to this woman's abode as an equal. She was at the woman's mercy, von Essen or no, and Micah feared her family's prestigious title would have little sway here. The woman did not seem like one who cared for such things. She did not seem like one who cared much for anything really, or even about anything. Her lips might have been curved into a coy smile, like one who had been dealt a particularly good hand in a card game, but her red eyes were hard and horribly empty. Micah could tell on an instinctual level that this woman was not one to be trifled with. Why, she might not have been a woman at all. Now, why are you looking at me like that? The woman, catching Micah's cowed expression, pouted. You're making me feel quite unwelcome. I thought you would be relieved to see my face after being left to languish in the catacombs of my castle for hours on end, but maybe I was hoping for too much. In any case, you shouldn't frown like that, dear. It's an awful waste. You'll wrinkle your pretty face. This chastisement was familiar to Micah. She had heard it many times from her mother. While Micah had been trained to obey her mother without question, however, it was not so with this strange woman. Some of her reticence fell away and needled Micah's head. What I do with my face is my own concern. I'm sure it's none of your business. My. The mysterious woman tittered. You're feistier than you look. I took you for a shrinking violet, but maybe I was mistaken. You might make for quite the amusing plaything, though you'd be a good sight prettier if you smiled. I can't say I blame you for being so surly, though. I never liked smiling on command either, though it's been many years since anybody last tried to give me orders. It's fortunate nobody can tell me what to do now, at least. It came at quite the price, but... Oh well, never mind. Where are my manners? My name is Magdalena, but you may call me Lena. My family's name, meanwhile, is of no particular importance. They might have commanded some respect back in the day, but it is not so now. They have long since been obliterated. I doubt history will remember them. It would not wish to. I am all that's left of their legacy, a fact I would very much love to rub in their faces, but alas, I never got the chance. It is very nice to meet you for the second time this night. So saying, Magdalena dropped a neat curtsy, taking hold of her cape in lieu of her skirt. But I am afraid I will not be afforded much of a chance to properly know you. While I would relish the chance to speak to a couple of young maidens such as yourselves, I have designs for you beyond idle chatter. And what do you mean by that exactly? Only that, now I have brought you here, I cannot continue to let you live. You have already seen too much. What? Henny stared at Magdalena with wide eyes, so full of fear the air swelled with it. What do you mean? What I said. Do try to keep up. It's awfully tedious having to explain myself down to the finer details. But I suppose you have the right to know the bare minimum, prisoners though you may be. Okay, at least we're being honest and upfront here, that's something. I would hate to keep you in suspense, and at this point it matters not how much you know. You will not be able to tell anybody else what you might learn here. Oh, we're going to a monologue. Okay, great. You'll not be venturing forth beyond the walls of my castle ever again. Magdalena smiled, her lips lifting in a wicked grin, not so very unlike that of the Joker in Henny's pack of cards. Though Magdalena's face was white, her lips were red, much like her eyes. They stood out in her milky face, like a rose blooming despite the winter's chill. Or else, Micah thought with a shudder, freshly spilled blood. You must understand that I am not a normal woman. No human can hope to best me when it comes to a competition of sheer strength, as the bandits who were pursuing you soon discovered. It did not take me more than a few seconds to dispatch them. The fight they put up was so pathetic, it makes me wonder why they even bothered. If they'd any respect for my time, they would have slit their own throats with their daggers and saved me the trouble. You humans can be awfully thoughtless. But if they had done that, I wouldn't have been able to bring the leader of their little group back to my castle. He was in a bad way, and I was obliged to introduce myself to him before bestowing upon you similar honors. I really must apologize for making you wait. Magdalena dropped another curtsy, as an elegant lady might, but it smacked of insincerity. Insincerity. Jesus, I'm sorry. There was no respect in Magdalena's red irises for her pair of prisoners. Rather than sympathize with their plight, she, instead, seemed little more than amused. How many men and women had Magdalena brought to her castle, and how many had she summarily tortured? Mikey knew of at least one besides herself and Henny. The bandits' leader. Did you kill him? Eventually, yes. It was quite the sight. You ought to have seen the way he begged and pleaded and groveled at my feet. A grown man like that who was practically made of muscle. Oh, how fickle fortune is. Just 1 hour hence he was the predator, stalking his prey through the woods alongside his lackeys, and the next? Magdalena drew her hand across her neck in an unequivocal, universal gesture of a slit throat. Well, what goes around comes around. He got what he deserved, and the screams really were exquisite. Did you perchance happen to hear them? He was being rather loud. Henny gave a violent start at this, but said nothing sensible. Her mouth fell open, but only syllables came out, all broken up and interspaced. What? Oh, goodness. Surprised, are you? You shouldn't be. That man was a bandit, a vulture in a man's flesh who profited on misery. If it weren't for me, you would have gone the same way as the poor unfortunates in that stalled carriage, the driver and the horses too. Nobody was spared their ravages, man nor beast. They made quite the grisly mess. Were I a century younger, it would have been enough to turn even my stomach. Maybe that is so, but to gloat over another death like that, it doesn't seem right. You're twisted. If I am twisted, that is only because this world... Magdalena began, but then paused. A momentary furrow captured her white, smooth brow, but soon it straightened out, as though nothing of note had occurred. Well, never mind that. I do not wish to spout clichés about good and evil. I would begin to bore myself. The fact of the matter is, that man got what he deserved, as did his compatriots. I took great pains to ensure that. I paid that brigand back twofold for what he did to you. Did you know that he tried to be stoic in the beginning? Humans often are, human males in particular. They've so much pride. It's funny, really, that a cur like that would care so very much about appearances. He was less a man than he was a dog, but he still had pretensions of greatness or of grandeur. I soon stripped him of those lofty delusions, however. Humans are very alike in one regard at least. You all scream the same after your bones have been broken, and you all bleed red.
That man was a brigand, I'll admit, who deserved the hangman's noose, but that's for a court of law to decide, not you. What you did isn't justice, it's barbaric. You shouldn't be taking pleasure in other people's deaths. What gave you the right to kill him anyway?
I had every right to kill him. He was trespassing upon my land, as were you and the young lady here. His life was already forfeit the moment he encroached upon my territory. The Lord's Prayer may say that we ought to forgive those who wrong us, but I've no patience with such teachings. They do not apply to me. The Lord has forsaken me. I am no longer a member of his congregation. He would have no love for me as I am now, and I have little love for him. I cannot conceive how he could have let me suffer so, if he truly existed. Getting existential already, okay? Sometimes I do wonder.
So, you mean to add blasphemy to your list of crimes?
Oh, I've done far, far worse than that in my time. The morals of you good, sententious churchgoers do not apply to me. I am not of your kind. I am a drinker of blood who walks the night. I have been alive for over a century, though my life is very different to yours and your mistress's. I doubt that you could understand me, and neither do I want you to. I have no desire to understand you either. There would be no point. We are much too different.
A drinker of blood? But that would make you... a vampire?
It was Micah who offered forth this label after Henny's voice faltered. Micah was an ardent devourer of books, and she had read before of such shadowy denizens of the night, much to her mother's chagrin. Lady von Essen had thought that Micah, as a well-bred young woman, ought not to read at all. It will only excite your mind, dear, but should instead busy herself with embroidery. Micah, however, had always preferred books to busy work, particularly work which involved needles, and she found herself returning to stories time and time again, whenever she needed a break from her own dreary life. Relatable? Micah had read all manner of books over the years, but she preferred adventure stories full of mystery, intrigue, and, yes, even murder. Micah knew from her reading that vampires were nocturnal creatures, often aristocratic, who shunned the sunlight, dwelt in ruinous castles, and supped upon the lifeblood of fair maidens. Yes, Micah thought, in an oddly detached manner. That did make sense. She had sensed there was something strange about Magdalena when first their eyes had met. Micah's blue, Magdalena's shocking scarlet. Magdalena really must have been a vampire. It all made sense. At least, it would have had Micah been a heroine in one of her novels. But life, Micah reminded herself, was not akin to a story. Micah might have consumed books like a starving man, but she had sense enough to know that the words written within the pages of adventure stories were all skeins of fiction. Yeah, but all fiction is grounded in reality somehow, isn't it? Vampires ought to have remained within the realms of make-believe. They had no business walking about as humans did, made of cold, unfeeling flesh with hearts which no longer beat. They were supposed to be constructs, mere figments of fancy. But Magdalena was real, undoubtedly so, unless Micah thought striking her head had addled her, and unsettling though she was, Micah did not take her for a liar. Her confession had sounded quite sincere. Yes, that is correct. I am a vampire, and this castle is my territory. That and the woods that surround you. You wandered into my domain, you hopeless little lambs, while on the run from those awful bandits. I know none of this is your fault, and I've no quibbles with you. I am not blaming you for what occurred tonight. There. See how fair I am? I'm too nice by half, too nice for my own good cause. You have been awfully surly with me, the both of you, but I've only ever been polite. I would even let you go if I could. Dispatching of brigands is one thing, but I take no pleasure in harming young ladies. But I fear that would be foolhardy. I cannot allow any who have wandered into my realm to leave alive. I do not want you telling tall tales. I should snap both of your necks and be done with it, but... Magdalena's red eyes found Micah's, then held them. Her smile, with which hitherto had seemed so easy, faded, and once more her brow furrowed. You don't seem to be a mere peasant. Magdalena delivered this judgment softly, but something dark seemed to throb beneath her words, something sinister. I can tell from your clothes, dirty though they are, that you are from a wealthy background. Your voice and your bearing. Yes, even the way you look at me. It all suggests that you are, in fact, a lady. Would I be correct in that assessment? Why do you ask? It would be problematic for me if I were to dispatch a woman of renown. I would not want your disappearance to catch the attention of men in high places. Smart. Smart indeed. If they were to send out a search party into these woods, it is not wholly impossible that they would stumble upon my home. I have lived out of sight from the public eye for nigh on a century, and have no desire to invite half of Augsburg's constabulary into my home. The idea is incredibly unpleasant. Magdalena pulled a face as a small child might when confronted with a plate of food they did not much care for. If you really are a lady, I might do well to exercise some caution. I suppose I can always spare your life and kill only this dowdy common girl. Your maid, I take it? Magdalena looked to Henny now, her lips curled into a mean smile. What do you say to that? It is not a bad trade, is it? A life for yours? Precious few people who find themselves in my abode are ever able to live to tell the tale. You would be one in. Goodness, how many guests have I had over the years? There must be a good 200 or 300. Aren't you touched by my thoughtfulness? Silence descended in the decrepit cell following Magdalena's announcement. Stuck for words, Maike could only stare at her, her lips parted. What was she to say to Magdalena's proposal? How was she to feel? There was a relief, certainly, at the prospect of escaping the cell, but Maike could take no real pleasure in it, not when it would come at the cost of Henny's life. How could she abandon her friend, who had been by her side since her early childhood? Were it not for Henny, Maike knew she would be dead already, butchered like a farmyard animal in her parents' carriage. Henny had rescued her once already from a bandit's blade. It seemed uncontrollable that she should leave her now. Maike turned this over in her mind, worrying her teeth with her lower lip when...
Well, if my life's all you're after...
Henny reached out, taking Maike's hands between her own, then said,
What else is there to think about? It sounds like a fine suggestion to me. Don't you agree, Maike?
I knew you'd say something like that, but... What? Maike stared into Henny's round, soft face, her eyes vast and uncomprehending. Surely you don't mean that. You're not alright with this, are you, Henny?
Well, it'd be a lie if I said I was jumping up and down for joy at the prospect of being eaten by a vampire.
Henny's smile wavered, though she tried to maintain a brave face.
But if it's what I've got to do to save your life, Maike, then I'll do it. I do love you after all. I'm not going to let you get hurt.
Henny tried to sound brave, but Maike could hear how her voice trembled all the same. Could feel, too, how Henny's hands shook. Henny, like her, had heard the screams of the bandits' leader as they echoed through the halls. Though neither woman had seen his final moments, they knew from his cries that his demise must have been barbarous. Barbarous? All these funny words today. Maike could not allow Henny to endure such suffering for her sake. She could not allow her to die. Maike knew Henny wished only the best for her, but... No. Maike spoke up, her voice surprisingly cool, given the wild fluctuations of her heart within her breast. I won't allow that to happen. It wouldn't be right. If one of us must remain here, then it ought to be me.
What? No! You can't mean that, Maike. Surely you jest.
No, I'm not. You know I've a terrible sense of humor, Henny. I hardly ever tell jokes. I don't have enough levity in me for them. I'm being very serious. You've always looked out for me, ever since I was small. Not that I always listened to you. Don't you remember when I stole the keys to the mausoleum in my insufferable curiosity and crept inside?
But of course I remember. You dragged me in after you, despite my warnings. And it went about as badly as expected too.
Didn't it just? Faintly, Micah smiled, dire though their situation was, happy to share this memory, though it wasn't at all fond, with Henny. For all she knew, it might very well have been her last chance to reminisce with her maid like this. Micah knew not what the future held, but
Lady von Essen was in such an awful mood when she found out. It was quite frightening. I'd never seen anything like it.
oh yes, she was fearfully cross. It's a wonder fire didn't come out of her nostrils.
I recall that she struck you, and then when I tried to argue on your behalf, she struck me too.
Wow.
She struck me so hard, my ears still ring from it sometimes.
Wow, okay. God, yes, poor hen. I felt awful about it at the time. Really, I did. I didn't care about my punishment. God knows I deserved it. But you'd done nothing wrong. You'd been perfectly reasonable about the whole thing. If I'd listened to you, we could have avoided the furore altogether, but I was too reckless. I ignored your wishes, but you still tried to protect me. You jumped to my defense just like a knight, and you were slapped silly for your troubles. It was horribly unfair. I've dragged you into all sorts of messes before, Henny, and you've always come to my defense. You've been a wonderful friend to me throughout the years, but I can't keep relying upon you. I don't want to take advantage of your kindness.
But Micah, I like it when you rely on me. Please feel free to take advantage. That's what I'm here for.
No, I can't. It isn't right. It's long past time that I repaid you.
By offering yourself up as a sacrifice in my stead? That isn't what I want. Micah, please.
Henny stared at her mistress, her expression entreating.
I love you, but you're acting like a crazy woman.
And you are the pinnacle of rationality, are you, considering this crazy deal? That is truly insane. Don't tell me you've accepted all this.
Of course I've not accepted it. I'm terrified, really. See how my poor hands are shaking? But one of us biting it has to be better than both of us.
Yes, but still.
If I can protect you, then I must. I will. That's my job.
No, it isn't. Not any longer. I'm absolving you of your duty, Henny. This farce has lasted long enough.
What farce?
You know what I mean. Magdalena? Yes? Magdalena looked between the two women, a coy smile playing about her lips. Have you quite finished with your little quarrel? I must confess I was beginning to feel rather left out. My apologies. I will endeavor not to be so rude in the future to my hostess. Micah dipped her head in a gesture of esteem, one not so very dissimilar to the way Henny was bidden to bob around her mother. Micah knew she could not afford to anger Magdalena. If Micah was to save Henny, she would be obliged to beg and bow and scrape. Unfortunately, begging and bowing were not beyond Micah's means, even though she was a lady. She was no stranger to scraping either, having tearfully entreated her parents to reconsider her marriage prospects. She had failed on that score, but she did not intend to fail now. She knew what she must say. It seemed a stretch that Magdalena would believe her, But if she did... I fear you are laboring under a misapprehension, Lady Magdalena. Your reasoning is sound. There would indeed be a ruckus if a noble woman was to go missing, but your application is not. I am not a lady, you see, but my companion is. Going that road, are we? Oh? Magdalena raised an eyebrow. Nguyen, then you mean to say you are the maid and this lumpen Henny here is the mistress? What were we saying about being polite? That is correct, yes. I know I am dressed as a lady, albeit a disgraced one, but that was part of Lord and Lady von Essen's ruse. While travelling, they often have me dressed as a lady, while Henny, that is to say Henrike, dresses as a maid. It is a means of subterfuge so that, if our carriage were to be attacked by bandits, I am the one who should be in harm's way, rather than my mistress. Only a truly desperate bandit would rummage through the pockets of a maid, especially when she is with her lady.
What? Maike, that's...
Henny began, but Maike cut her off. She was warming to her ruse, despite the chill which infused the air, and she found she could not still her tongue, not until she had delivered her whole address. Lady Henrike is the one whom will be missed in Augsburg, not I. She has a fiancé waiting for her, you know, and he is a very important man. If she doesn't arrive before the dawning of the next day, he will be certain to send out a search party for her. You would not want that, would you? Magdalena pondered Maike's tall tale for a few moments, one gloved hand resting upon her hip. As she thought, Maike stared at her, compelling her through sheer force of will to accept her tale at face value. It was patently unbelievable, of this Maike knew, but she need not convince a whole jury. She needed only to convince Magdalena. An age seemed to pass, during which nobody spoke, until... Oh, very well. If that is how it is, then I suppose I have no choice. You may leave my abode, Lady Henrike. Here Magdalena dropped another effusive curtsy. If that is indeed your real name. I will grant you the chance to reunite with a fiancé in Augsburg who must be awaiting you with no shortage of anticipation. Who wouldn't, after all, wish to dote upon a maiden as fair and fine as yourself? Your surprisingly well-spoken maid, however, will be bidden to remain by my side. Do we have a deal? Yes, I would do anything to ensure Lady Henrike's safety. Oh, most assuredly. You would not consent to acting as a decoy on her behalf if you didn't care. What a wonderful friendship you women have. It is quite special, really, particularly given the disparity in your social statuses. Now, come along, Lady Henrike. It was very lovely to make your acquaintance, but now I fear I must cut our meeting short. Let me escort you to the front door. It's the least I can do for a woman of your lofty status.
What? Maike, no!
Henny cried, but in vain. Magdalena was soon upon her, her pale fingers winding tight about her wrist.
Maike, please stop this. Tell her the truth.
I'm sorry, Hen, but Abashed, Micah dropped her gaze to the stone floor. Though she had given her life for Henny's sake, she found she could not meet her friend's gaze as she was dragged bodily from the prison cell they had both inhabited. The hurt in Henny's countenance and the betrayal stung far too much. This is how it has to be.
Says who? I was willing to go along with this woman's plan, but you scuppered it up. I don't understand you at all, Micah. Why would you tell such a tissue of lies for little old me? Magdalena, please.
Henny stared at Magdalena, all while trying and failing to dig her heels into the stone floor of her cell.
Surely you can't believe my mistress. It's obvious she's lying. There's no way she isn't a lady, not with a fancy, proper way of talking. She's far, far more genteel than I could ever dream of being.
Her manners are certainly more polished than your own, yes, but perhaps this comes from years of servitude. You could stand to learn a thing or two from your maid, Lady Henrike. Your fiancé won't think much of you as you are now, I'm afraid. Why, you're speaking almost like a fishwife. Now, come along. Let us not argue. You will give me a headache.
But, Micah, I can't leave her. Let me go.
Henny cried anew, squirming now that Magdalena's hold upon her did not loosen. If anything, in fact, it seemed to grow stronger, to such a degree that Henny screamed.
Oh!
Henny's cries echoed throughout the cell, more unbearable than those of the bandit leader during his final moments. Magdalena had not made Henny bleed, at least, but she was gripping her wrist so tightly, Micah feared she might snap it. Magdalena had strength enough, or so Micah had been led to believe, to best even a fully grown man. Henny, who was short and dumpy, could put up little in the way of a fight. The poor maid was quite helpless before her. There was nothing which could be done, not any longer. Henny would have to leave, while Micah would remain incarcerated in this dreary cell, alone. This was what Micah had wanted when she had spun her, frankly untenable story. So why then did she feel so guilty?
Let go of me! Let go, I say! Micah, please!
Henny continued to protest, but Magdalena remained insensible to her cries. The door of the cell was closed anew with a metallic thud. And then Micah was left, sitting upon the ground, as she had been 1 hour hence when she had woken, pale-faced and trembling, and all alone. Oh dear. The time passed at an agonizingly slow pace as Micah sat on the stone floor of her cell with her legs demurely crossed. Without Henny to cheer her, the air felt colder than it had before, the shadows darker. Magdalena had taken Henny from the cell so abruptly she had not been afforded the chance to collect her scattered playing cards. Now these cards were strewn upon the floor upturned, red diamonds, red as Magdalena's eyes, and coal-black clubs. Micah caught the eyes of a nearby joker, his lips pulled into a garish smile, and shivered. Paranoid though she knew it was, it felt as though the card was mocking her. Micah reached out, fingers trembling, to grab the card, and flipped it over. She did not want to look at the joker's grinning face. She did not want to think either about what Henny was doing, or how she was feeling, and she certainly did not want to think of her own future. It would be easier to drive such musings from her mind, and yet... Though Micah tried to keep her thoughts placid, like the smooth surface of an untroubled lake, Sinister quarries, sharp-toothed like eels, writhed just beneath the surface. What would happen when Magdalena returned? Did she mean to kill Maike quickly, or would she make her suffer first? Magdalena had seemed to derive great pleasure from her torture of the bandits' leader, but she had said she did not care to harm young ladies. Had she meant it? Maike could only hope if Magdalena did mean to kill her, she would do so quickly. She had suffered enough for one night. No, for one lifetime. Maike, despite her heroism, did not want to die. The thought terrified her. When she imagined how Magdalena might kill her, a blade to the throat perhaps, poison, drowning, strangulation, she felt her skin, icy cold now, ripple with goose flesh. She did not want to be stabbed or poisoned or drowned or choked. She wanted to live. Maike had read stories of knights and their exploits, but she was no chivalrous sir herself. She was a young woman, though not, as her mother might have reminded her, so very young anymore, and she had little experience of the world beyond her parents' home. From an early age, Maike had been taught to hold her tongue, to hold her thoughts, to be sweet and pretty and patient and, above all else, pliant. She was not supposed to think for herself, let alone stand up for herself. It wasn't appropriate conduct for a lady. Maike had endured 25 years as such, living only to please her parents, and her parents' esteemed visitors, and later her parents' chosen fiancé, but it had not felt like living. The only times Maike felt herself were those when she played cards with Henny, or read her books, or sat up by her window at night and stared out into the garden. Maike was 25, almost 26, but she knew nothing of the world. She knew nothing of freedom. She had never truly lived. How then was she supposed to die? She could not pass on, surely, until she had at least been afforded the chance to visit some of the places she had read about in her stories. Such dreams had been all which had kept Maike going throughout her dreary days kept indoors. She had persevered, not for the sake of her present, which she had lamented, but the hopes of a better future which waited, she had always been sure, beyond the horizon. Now, Maike feared she would never be able to reach that future. Her life was to be curtailed before it could truly begin. She would never see any of the world now. Paris and Venice and Rome would remain a mystery to her, exotic settings for stories and nothing more. She had been born trapped, and she would die thus. The only difference was, it was no longer her parents entrapping her, but a monster. It was a pitiful way to bring her life to its denouement. Had her 25 years thus far been a story, Maike thought bitterly, it would have been a hopelessly dull one full of endless waiting, but precious little doing. Waiting to live. Waiting to die. Was there any difference between these two states, really, when all was said and done? There's no point crying about it. Maike muttered this under her breath in the dark for her own peace of mind. There's no guarantee I would have been allowed to live even if Magdalena did set me free. I would have to return to Herr Gerhard, and we would wed, and then I would spend the rest of my days trapped in his house. I would go from being a cloistered daughter to a cosseted wife. Is that any better, really? It would be, Maike mused, nothing but another form of imprisonment. Walter had the money to travel anywhere, but whether he would be willing to expend these funds on little jaunts for his housebound, bored wife was doubtful. Perhaps it was better this way. Maike had no life, she knew, waiting for her beyond the walls of Magdalena's castle. She had never been allowed to live as she had wanted. That being the case, she might as well die. I don't know if I agree, but if you're in what looks like a very hopeless situation, it makes sense that she'd rationalize it that way. She had nothing left to lose. There was no sense in being sad, not really, but... Maike wiped her eyes with the back of her right arm and felt an alarming dampness against her skin. She had not expected that, but perhaps she ought to. Her heart felt like it was breaking. Why am I crying? Maike brought her knees beneath her chin once more and, drawing her arms about her legs, tried to curb her tears. The minutes continued to pass by, each more intolerable than the one which had preceded it, until, at last, Maike was alerted by the sound of footsteps. The iron door which partitioned the cell from the hall opened with a scraping squeal, and once more Magdalena entered Maike's cell. Though Magdalena had left with an unwilling Henny and Tao, she was now alone. Henny had gone. Well, well, aren't you a sight for sore eyes? How fares you, my dear captive? I do apologize for the wait. Oh, never mind about me. What about Henny? Did you set her free? Goodness me, your loyalty towards your lady is most profound. I was certain you would be inquiring as to your own fate, but no. You seem only to care for her. You really ought to worry about yourself more, given the circumstances. But I shall endeavor to allay your worries. I did indeed set your mistress free. I escorted her to the entrance of my home, then bid her on her merry way. Now, why do you ask? Do you not trust me? I mean, it's fair to assume, well, on the one hand, do we really have any basis to trust you? Plus, I would assume that Magdalena didn't buy that lie of Maike's. But we'll see. You've done little to deserve it, given the way you've treated Henny and I, but oh, I'm so glad to hear it. I only hope that Henny will be alright on her own. That remains to be seen. I set her free, yes, but there's no guarantee she will be able to find her way to Augsburg, not in the dark with all this fog. These woods are dense, and the paths are not clearly signposted. It would come as no surprise if she were to find herself lost, or else at the mercy of wild animals. That too. This forest is fair teeming with wolves. Did you know that? Wolves? Oh yes, this forest is just as much their territory as it is mine, and they often come out at night to hunt. Bandits aren't the only things fair ladies have to watch out for. But if your lady friend is resourceful and luck is on her side, she should emerge from this trial unscathed. Let us hope that she'll be all right, shall we? Maike said nothing to this, but instead dropped her gaze, her irises fixed upon her knees. Her mind turned not to her own indeterminate fate, but to Henny, who would now be staggering through the woods, wreathed in ephemeral fog. How far away was Augsburg? Maike did not know. She had lost all sense, not only of time, but of space. The world seemed to have shrunk until it encompassed naught but her and her cell. Being imprisoned in Magdalena's abode would spell certain death, as it had for the leader of the bandits. But Henny was not yet out of the woods, literally and metaphorically speaking. She could still meet with disaster during her attempted escape. Maike saw Henny backed against the copse of trees, their branches slender, sinister, as a pack of hungry wolves bore down upon her, the eyes glinting madly in the moonlight. But this was only one possibility. Magdalena had said Henny would need luck on her side, and Henny had that in abundance if her performance in Joker was anything to be believed. She had always been better at cards than Maike. Now, enough about Lady Henrike. She is no longer my captive and, as such, is of little interest to me. I would far rather speak to you. To me? Yes, indeed. I've designs on you, my loyal little serving girl. I do hope you'll make yourself useful during your stay. Designs? Then, you mean... Maike pressed her fingers to the base of her throat. She could feel her pulse beating beneath the surface of her cool skin, as erratic as a rabbit's caught in a snare. Do you wish to drain me of my blood? Do you want me to drain you of your blood? Magdalena tittered. How very eager you are. It is not that, do not misunderstand. I wish only, if you mean to kill me, that you would do so quickly. I've grown sick of waiting. Oh yes, that look in your eyes is delectable. It may be more so even than your blood. You are so very defiant, but what is this I spy? You appear to be shaking, my poor little Maike. That is because of the cold. And not because of your fright? I was able to protect my dear friend. I've nothing to be afraid of now. Then you care nothing for your own life? I've never been afforded a life. You may take it if you wish. You wouldn't be the only one. Ah yes, that is the fate, or so I've heard, of being a servant. You poor dear. Magdalena's red eyes softened, and for a moment Maike wondered whether she could not see a trace of sympathy upon her captor's fair face. It lasted only a second, however, before it faded, replaced instead with a wry smile. Well, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I cannot comply with your request. For the moment, that is. I will drain your blood in due course, but have no desire to do so now. The bandits I encountered earlier made for a more than satisfactory meal. I am so glutted, I do not think I could drink another drop of blood. Then you mean to draw this farce out longer still? I'll draw it out for as long as I wish, until I'm sufficiently thirsty. There seems little sense in overindulging. Your blood would taste sweeter, I'm sure, than a bandit's, but that only makes it more imperative that I save you until I truly want you. Though it was Maike's death Magdalena spoke of, there seemed something sultry, seductive even in the way she stressed her words. Micah, who was unused to being wanted, found the blood pooling beneath her cheeks despite the chill which clung to her. How would it feel, she wondered, when Magdalena brought her lips to her neck? Would it hurt? She supposed she would feel a pricking sensation as Magdalena's teeth sank into her flesh, and then... "No, won't you come with me? You'll catch your death of cold staying inside this dreary cell, and then you'll be of no use to anybody. If I am to enjoy you properly, I would prefer to do so while your body is still warm." What? Micah looked at Magdalena, her blue eyes uncomprehending. "Are you really letting me go?" "In a manner of speaking, yes. Though I'll only be transporting you from one prison to another. As your hostess, I don't believe that these quarters are wholly appropriate for a long-term stay, especially not for a fair maiden such as yourself. You will be in my abode for several days yet, I fear, until I further need of you. Until then, I would like you to live in some measure of comfort." How unexpected. I didn't know that you were so gracious. I can be. I've hidden depths, you see, much like the forest that surrounds my humble abode. I do so hate to see you shiver so, and your skin is so pale, poor dear. You and I could almost be sisters. White skin may be fitting for us vampires, but it isn't so for maidens, not even the fairest in all the land. Now, please follow me. I doubt you've any real wish to stay here, languishing, unless you mean to make a further martyr of yourself." No, Micah bit her lower lip. She was loath to accept kindness from Magdalena, but she did raise a fair point. It was cold in her cell and miserable alongside it. If she remained there overnight, it did not seem impossible that the blood in her veins really might freeze. Micah had already given up on her own life, but she did not want to die as a stray dog, racked with shivers. If that is what you want from me, then I've no reason to refuse. How very biddable you are. The words which come from your mouth may be stubborn, but it seems you've experience when it comes to following orders. Of course I do. I'm a maid, like I said. Ah, yes, so you did. That would explain your servility. Part of me was hoping you might refuse, so that I would be bidden to carry you. But this is fine too. It spares me the effort. Shall we? Please, lead the way. Micah dropped Magdalena a curtsy, this time taking her dirtied skirts between her fingers, the pads of which had turned pink from the cold. Magdalena smiled at this display. For a prisoner, you're awfully cheeky. Then turned upon her heel after bidding Micah to follow. Naturally, Micah obeyed. She could see she had little choice in the matter. Magdalena led Micah down a twisting hallway packed full of cells identical to the one Micah and Henny had been imprisoned in. Micah tried not to peer into these cells as she passed them, but curiosity soon overcame her, and she found her head swiveling. She feared, as she stared through the darkness, that she might encounter sights more horrific than she was capable of comprehending. Rusted torture instruments, perhaps, or dead bodies. But it was so very dark in the bowels of Magdalena's home that Micah could scarce see anything. Not even the moonlight, which spilled intermittently through the barred windows, could fully illuminate the sprawling prison complex. This, Micah supposed, tearing her eyes away from one of the cells as she passed it, was probably a good thing. She had witnessed enough horrors for one night. Magdalena eventually brought Micah to the foot of a staircase which led up from her subterranean cells.
Careful.
Magdalena cautioned Micah before they began their ascent.
These steps are steep and slippery too. If you fall, you may break your neck.
Had Micah been less nervous, she might have laughed to hear her jailer fuss over her so. A broken neck did not seem like so very cruel a fate when compared to Magdalena's designs upon her. Perhaps it would be quicker to die thus, rather than having her blood drained. At the very least, it would be a swifter demise than freezing in her prison cell. Micah felt little in the way of humor, however, as she took the chill banister beneath her right hand and began to climb. She could recognize the irony in Magdalena's warning, though only vaguely. Her mouth felt hewn into a permanent line, as though carved from stone, her brow furrowed. It seemed unlikely she would ever smile again. The chill of the basement faded as Micah cleared the final step of the twisting staircase to emerge in a spacious hallway with arched windows and candles flickering upon the stone walls in sconces. The hallway was not so very dissimilar in decor to her parents' home, though it was less ornate, the furnishings worn down by old age. It was apparent that Magdalena's home had once been noble, but it had clearly fallen to rot and ruin, its heyday long since past. The air and the ground floor smelled almost as rank as that in the dungeon, and every conceivable surface was heaped with inches of dust. There was so much dust, in fact, that Micah could feel it in the air when she inhaled. The dust irritated her eyes and nose and laid heavily, unpleasantly upon her tongue. Micah swallowed, hoping to void her mouth of the taste of decay, but in vain. The dust was so thick she sneezed, which prompted Magdalena to say, with a wryly amused smile,
"Bless you."
Thank you," Micah replied abashed, and then, "I thought you did not care for God and his teachings."
"I don't, but I presume that you do. I thought you might appreciate it."
"I see. How very thoughtful of you."
"I know. For a vampire, I'm unusually sensitive."
Really, Micah thought, as she canvassed the disused, dusty hallway, she would be more appreciative if Magdalena would let her go. But that did not seem to be high upon Magdalena's list of priorities. Perhaps it would be for the best if she let go of such unfounded optimism. That would lead only to disappointment, and Micah had gorged herself on more than a fair share of that already. Mute with fatigue, Micah followed Magdalena to the end of the hall, wherein a wooden door was inlaid. Magdalena seized the brass handle and twisted it, then pushed it ajar. It stuck for a few moments, as though unwilling to move, but soon shifted, creaking as it did so. When the door swung back, it was to reveal a vast, spacious room, with the ceiling so cavernous, Micah had to crane her neck to see it. A large ornate staircase was set in the center of the room, though it felt more like a chamber, which rose to the floor above it, the banisters carved with fronds of ivy and bunches of grapes. This, Micah supposed, must have been the entrance hall. It had clearly been designed to impress, for its vastness was almost dizzying, and probably really hard to heat. Magdalena's home, could it really be a castle, was larger even than Micah's, and vast enough to be unnerving. Trapped within the scene of spoiled luxury, Micah felt smaller than ever before, a wooden doll rather than a grown woman rattling about in a playhouse. The entrance hall bore a wine-red carpet and stone walls, but it showed clear signs of deterioration. The dust was so profuse that it made Micah's eyes water, and several of the stone steps which led upwards were cracked and chipped. A grand piano could be found in one corner of the room, but its lid was shut, and Micah doubted it had been played, if it still could be played, in decades. There was a chandelier in the entrance hall, hanging aloft from the high ceiling, but when Micah craned her head upwards, she could see even in the dark that it was festooned with spider webs. The house might have been round once, but it was not so now. It seemed a wonder, really, that it still stood, when clearly it was uncared for. "Your servants don't seem to be working very hard." Micah spoke lightly, her voice swallowed by empty air. "Perhaps you ought to see to hiring new staff? My mistress would never permit." Micah brought her hand to the banister of the grand staircase, then drew it back, wincing. The pads of her thumb and index finger were fuzzy with dust. "This." "Oh." Magdalena, who had already begun to ascend the staircase, turned to look at Micah and smiled. "Are you judging my home, Micah?" "I would never presume to be so rude. I just thought it might feel more homey, that's all, if it were less of a pile." Magdalena laughed, then shook her head. "You are quite right, of course, to judge. Please, judge away to your heart's content." "I've never been much of a fan of this place, really. Its scale is too grandiose even for my liking. My great-grandfather, it was he who had this castle built, had more money than sense, I'm afraid, and absolutely no taste to back it up. A house has no need to be this large." "Agreed." "But there was land enough for it, and money too, and when a man has land and money and means, he will often think, well, why not? Practicality matters little in the decisions of great men, and neither, to my unending woe, does aesthetic sense." "I can believe that. My master rather." Micah's face flushed at this gaffe, the tips of her ears turning pink. "Half filled my own residence with pointless baubles. They were all very expensive, but not particularly cohesive. The parlor looked like a museum once he was through with it. It hardly seemed like a place to sit and relax. I was too afraid to spend any measure of time in there in case I broke something." "Then it seems we have something, at least, in common. I found this place dismal even when my family was alive, and we had a legion of maids back then to keep everything spick and span. I kept the dust and the cobwebs at bay, bless their hearts, but they couldn't combat the loneliness. Now my family is dead, and all our maids along with them. I can hardly take on new hires, being what I am, so my home was rather left to go to ruin. I clean what I can, but there's so very much house to clean, and only one of me. It's quite the overwhelming challenge. My attempts at cleaning have, over the last half a century, fallen quite by the wayside. Yeah, I was about to say, you do actually make an effort? I didn't really think so. I hope you can forgive my slovenliness.
Oh no, it's fine. I understand.
You're too kind. Magdalena's red eyes softened as they head back in the dungeon, with something akin to sympathy. But before Mikey could ponder this, her jailer turned. Oh, listen to me prattle on. It is most inconsiderate of me when you must be tired. Let us make haste to your room. We've not long to go now. Micah followed behind Magdalena as a puppy might, almost grateful to her for the promise of a room and of a bed. It was as Magdalena said, she really did feel tired. She was more than ready to lie down beneath warm covers, or even lukewarm covers, and sleep. Anything would have been better than the stone floor upon which she had been lying. Micah yawned, her eyes blossoming with tears anew, while pressing her right hand, fingertips still flecked with dust, instinctively to her mouth. Oh? But, half asleep though she was, Micah's senses were alert enough for her to detect a sudden noise. There came, through the yawning gulf of the entrance hall, a sound not dissimilar to that Micah had heard in the dungeon. It was a scream, or was it? Micah was unsure. This sound, this scream, was fainter than the one she had detected in the dungeon, and seemed to emit not from the ground under which the cells lay, but above her head. Was there another person concealed in Magdalena's abode? Somebody other than herself? Was it another captive, kept separate from the rest? Was it Henny? Magdalena? Lena, please. Magdalena is quite the mouthful. I would rather you use a nickname, as you did with your mistress. Micah wished to contest this. Her relationship with Magdalena was not half so close as to allow the use of nicknames, but she felt too tired to engage in an argument. What did it matter, really, how she addressed Magdalena, when soon she would be dead? Lena, then. What was that noise I just heard? What noise? You didn't hear it. Micah stared at Magdalena, her expression one of patent disbelief. It wasn't very loud, I'll grant you, but it was unmistakable. I swear it sounded just like a scream. A scream, Magdalena pondered, one hand beneath her chin. Such sounds are not unheard of in my abode when I'm attending to a prisoner. Micah shivered. But there is nobody in these walls now, save me and you. Nobody living, at least. Then it's not the imprisoned bandit? Certainly not. He will never make a peep again. I made sure of that with my own 2 hands. It would be hard for him to speak with half his throat torn out, you see. Oh. Micah pressed a hand to her own throat, as if to check its integrity, and as she did so, choked. The air was so thick with dust, it was hard to breathe. Now, dear, worry not. It was not your mistress who screamed thus, if that is what you are wondering. I am a woman of my word, and I promise I'll let her go. She is quite... well... she's not necessarily all right, but she is away from me and from my home, and there is the possibility she may live to see another dawn. Then who screamed? What was that sound? It must have been your imagination. You have overexerted yourself after this night's events. Anybody would be exhausted in your situation. It didn't feel like a dream, though. No. Magdalena shrugged in a manner which did not seem quite in keeping with her ladylike bearing. I suppose it must have been the wind then. It is very draughty in here. Is that all? That is all it could be, unless you mean to suggest that the dead can speak. Magdalena's red eyes bore into Micah's, so intense Micah feared they would consume her. Unsettled, Micah glanced away. She could not stare into those red eyes for too long without shivering. No, I wasn't suggesting that. Good. I know it is expected for women to lose their minds. I know it is expected for women to lose their minds at the drop of a hat, but I've grown quite sick of being regarded as the weaker sex. I'm pleased to see you're doing your level best not to let us down. Why, you haven't swooned even once, which is more than most men can say when I bring them here. It's really quite commendable. You might swoon, though, from a lack of sleep if we continue to tarry. Let us be off, or we shall never make it to our destination. Micah nodded, then followed along behind her hostess anew. She could no longer hear the scream, but its memory haunted her all the same. Micah had heard, during the course of that night, all kinds of cries born from human misery, and she thought she knew enough now to distinguish such sounds from the howling of the wind. That cry she had heard, though briefly, had not sounded like the breeze, regardless of what Magdalena said. Micah was certain that sound had belonged to a person, but why would Magdalena lie about such a thing? It was impossible to say. Here we are, home sweet home. So? Magdalena looked at Micah, an amused, almost roguish smile playing about her lips. What do you think? Micah examined the room mutely, her hands folded at her front. The chamber Magdalena had brought her to was dark, given the lateness of the hour, lit only by a pair of candles on either side of the bed. Micah could see, however, it was every bit as derelict as the rest of Magdalena's home, and even if she had not been able to see it, she would have smelled it. The air was musty. The air was musty, as though it had been left to circulate inside the room for years upon end, which it most likely had. Every surface, meanwhile, that Micah could make out in the flickering candlelight was covered in dust. The sheets upon the bed, though neatly made, were wholly with age and with insects, as was the carpet upon the floor. It was a sad room, really, ignorant of human occupation for years, but it was still a superior set of lodgings to those in which Micah had awoken. At least this room had a bed, a four-poster one no less, like the one at Micah's home, with a mattress and sheets upon which Micah could rest her weary limbs. The bedchamber had a wardrobe too, though Micah possessed nothing to store in it, save the clothes upon her own back. There was a writing desk upon which lay a basin for washing, and a chamber pot for more delicate business beneath. This pot was, thankfully, far cleaner than the one Micah had found in the dungeon. So white and spotless, she imagined it unused. The desk faced a large window, which was currently obscured by a set of dark blue curtains. Micah could not see beyond this window, though she doubted she would have been afforded much of a view even if she had drawn the curtains back. It was very late, after all. It was not as cold in this room as it was in the underground cells, but it was not warm either. The wind crept in through the fine cracks in the aged windows to toy with the reddish-orange flames of the 2 lit candles, to toy, too, with Micah's hair and the hem of her dress. She shivered. "Do you not have a tongue in your head?" Magdalena needled Micah, who had yet to speak. "Don't tell me that you've come over all shy. I brought you to this room solely so that you might sleep. I have no wicked designs on your innocence, regardless of how pretty you are. I only want your blood, not your body." "I beg your pardon?" Micah blinked at Magdalena, uncomprehending. "What designs are you speaking of?" "You cannot tell?" "I'm sure I have no idea." "None whatsoever?" "None at all. I'm wholly ignorant of such affairs." "Goodness me." Magdalena rolled her red eyes upwards to the ceiling, which seemed to sag beneath its own weight. "I can't tell whether you are being dense on purpose, or whether you really are that innocent. Did your mother never teach you what men and women do in chambers such as this?" "My mother did not, no. She thought such topics beneath her. That was my governess's job, although—" Micah frowned. "I don't think that I would care to do much of anything in a chamber like this one. It smells of the grave." "Tut tut." Magdalena clicked her tongue. "You're being rather rude about my home, you know. Here I am, trying to be a good hostess, and you throw my kindness back in my face." "I know you do not like your home much either. You told me." "Touché. I did try to pick out one of the pleasanter rooms for you, but there are so very many of them it is difficult to keep abreast of them all. I rarely have visitors over, and when I do, they all get thrown into the dungeons. There seemed little point, therefore, in keeping these rooms spick and span. I hope you can forgive all of the dust and the general disuse." "Oh, I've more to take issues with than that." "Yes, I suppose you do. You must have quite the bone to pick with me." "Maybe I do. But not right now. I'm too tired." "Yes, you do look it. Your face is frightfully pale." "I think a good night's sleep is what the doctor ordered, provided you are able to rest. You're able to rest, that is." "That would be nice, but—" Micah let her fingers trail along the brocaded covers of the bed, her expression pensive. "What did you mean earlier, when you said you'd no designs on my innocence?" "Dear me, I thought perhaps you were joking. But I can see that you're in no fit state for it." "I don't tell jokes. I've little to laugh about." "And you have even less to laugh about now, you poor dear." Magdalena cleared her throat. "I meant only to say that I would not do unto you as a man might, regardless of our surroundings. I've no nefarious intentions. Of that you can be assured. Micah thought of her governess's explanation of sex and of Walter's expectations come their wedding night, and flushed. If the sudden rush of blood beneath her cheeks enticed Magdalena in any way, she did not show it, though her fingers did twitch in their tight, constricting gloves. "I don't understand," Micah said after a pause, feeling, for all her reading, quite ignorant and unworldly. "I know what men and women do behind closed doors, but how could two women set about something similar? It's not possible." "You think so?" "I know so. My governess explained everything to me in great detail. When one wishes to make a baby, well, two women cannot do that. There would be no sense to it." "And you think people ought to do things only because they make sense?" That is quite narrow-minded. The world would be completely different if people only did what made sense, yeah. But people are often uneducated in such affairs, both in my time and your own. In some ways, the world has changed a great deal, yet in others... Well, never mind. I can see I'm only confusing you. You're so very innocent, it hurts. Perhaps it is to be expected, though. Ladies ought not to know of such things. They are born and bred to be ignorant. What? Micah had not understood the full implications of Magdalena's previous lament, but she understood well enough what she meant by this. Why would you call me that? I already told you, I'm not a lady, Lady Henrique's faithful servant. Yes, you did say. And that is true. She is the lady, not I. You did labor that point quite intensely, yes, in the cells. You were so fervent about it, you almost had me fooled. At least you would have. If you weren't such a terrible actress. What? Oh, don't what me. It's quite tiresome. Did you think I would fail to notice all your fancy turns of phrase? Your vocabulary is that of a well-to-do young madam, not a maid, not even a lady's maid. You wear that sumptuous dress of yours easily, dirty though it is, and your bearing is definitely regal. You could never hope to pass as a common serving girl, not in a month of Sundays. I'm not stupid. Then... Micah sank down on the bed, which creaked beneath her as if in warning. Her palms were pressed to the mattress to support her weight, which all of a sudden felt excessive, and her heart was pounding like a drum. You knew from the beginning I was lying? Indeed I did. It was very obvious. I can tell you've no practice in deceit, Micah dear. You're much too sweet for it. But if you knew I was lying, why did you agree to let Henny go? Herr Gerhard wouldn't lift a finger to aid Henny if she disappeared, but he will surely come looking for me. Herr Gerhard, is that the name of your fiancé? Yes, it is. And you do not refer to him by his Christian name? That is... Dear me, you mustn't be very close to the man if you address him in so distant a manner. Why, you make him sound like a stranger. Do you truly wish to marry him? I hadn't any choice. My parents... Ah, yes. It was silly of me to ask. That is how it always goes, isn't it? And what of your fiancé? Does he know you well enough to try and rescue you? I think he might. Micah swallowed, tasting dust on her tongue. He is an important businessman. He takes exacting care over his investments, or so I've heard. I imagine it would be the same for me too. I am a von Essen after all. There would be a lot of prestige in wedding me. So that is how he regards you, as a profitable purchase. I cannot say. After all, I hardly know him, and therefore cannot judge how he sees you. Does that sum it up? It is not entirely inaccurate, no. What a woeful state of affairs this is. It sounds like you would be wretched whether you were in my castle or out of it, particularly if the latter would entail being by this Herr Gerhard's side. Perhaps I did you a favor by bringing you here. Micah did not reply to this. She did not want to give Magdalena the satisfaction. Well, never mind all that. Your fiancé can try to look for you if he likes. I do not care. I doubt he would be able to best me. But you said you wished to avoid all that. Did I really? Yes, you did. And that's why you proposed letting me go. Oh yes, good memory. It would seem that the cold hasn't eaten away at all at your faculties, not just yet at least. As for why I changed my mind, well, that needn't concern you. But this is about me. Surely it must concern me. Oh, there was no real reason behind it. It was nothing more than an act of whimsy on my behalf. If you truly want to know why I went along with your chicanery, then... Let us say that I felt touched, that is all, upon seeing you throw your own life away for the sake of your maid. Few mistresses would be capable of such compassion. It was truly remarkable. I didn't want your efforts to be in vain, that's all. And you are prepared to put yourself in danger for that? I won't be in any danger. I'm a vampire. I can shatter rib cages with a single touch. Or thereabouts, at least. Now, you really must get some sleep. It will be much better for you than asking all of these silly questions. But I've nothing to change into. What will I sleep in? That's what worries you? Come on. I considered as much and took the liberty of stocking these drawers with some of my own clothes before I fetched you. You should find that they fit more or less, and they're clean, which is more than can be said for the rest of the linens in this place. There are some books too on the shelves which you may read, and I drew up a basin of water for you to wash yourself in upon waking. You could find no better amenities in any inn. I do hope you have a pleasant night and sweet dreams. Magdalena smiled sardonically, then dropped Micah another curtsy. Just try not to breathe in through your nose if the smell bothers you. I would not want you to spend the night coughing. A fair lady such as you needs her sleep. Okay, that is very considerate to even give her clothes and all that right away. Laughing to herself, Magdalena straightened, then turned. She departed, her long cloak trailing against the age-spotted carpet, and shut the door behind her. Micah waited until she heard Magdalena's footsteps fade, then rose once more to her feet. She crossed the room, her legs trembling, and seized the doorknob between her fingers, but it stubbornly refused to budge. The door was locked. Well, of course it is. Micah sighed. What did I expect? Defeated, Micah returned to the bed. Weary from all of what had happened, she collapsed upon it, her loose hair strewn in spirals across the sheets. Staring at the ceiling, which was drenched in darkness, Micah muttered softly to nobody in particular. What am I going to do now? Micah's question, of course, fell upon deaf ears. There was nobody in Magdalena's home to hear her. She was all alone. Well, what are you to do? Just wait for whatever Magdalena wants with you. Micah tossed and turned uneasily that night, in a bed which smelled of disuse and decay. The bed was more comfortable than the cell in which she had been held, but it was almost as cold, its thin sheets eaten away by old age and insects. At least the dungeon, with its sole wooden cot and its solitary window, barred against the moonlight, was supposed to be inhospitable. This bedroom, meanwhile, was a different matter. It was richly furnished, yet all its decorations had since been ravaged by time's unrepentant advances. The men and women who must have stayed in this room once, more than a century ago, would surely be dead now. In that sense, the room felt akin to a crypt. Did that make the bed a sarcophagus? Micah a corpse? Magdalena had spared Micah's life for the present, but Micah doubted that she would be so fortunate in the future. Magdalena was not, Micah reminded herself, a human, but a vampire. She meant to suck Micah of her blood, and when she did, Micah would lose her life, just as this room's previous inhabitants surely had. Magdalena's home was so decrepit, it seemed unfathomable that life could flourish within its walls. It was not so very different, really, from the von Essen mausoleum. The air even smelled the same. It smelled of death. No matter how Micah tried, she could not get comfortable. All the while, as she tried to sleep, she heard the wind howling outside, creeping stealthily like black-cloaked thieves through the cracks in the glass panes. Micah's bare toes curled against the mattress. Anxiously, she shuddered. What was to become of her now? Well, we'll see about that in the full game. Yes, so that was the end of the demo. Yeah. The introduction so far. You can play the demo for yourself if you want to have another look. I'll have the link to it down in the description below. It's on Steam right now. Oh, I missed to check when the game is supposed to come out. I think it might still be this year, but I'm not too sure. You might want to follow Ebihime or even their publishers, 2.5 Studios, to stay up to date, or wishlist it on Steam directly, of course. That does help out indie devs wishlisting games. But yeah, interesting so far. I do love the art and music. The story is very slow-paced again, which I think is a bit typical for Ebihime's writing. I don't hate it. And it does fit this kind of setting, I would say. Yeah, so we can see a bit of an enemies to lovers thing here, maybe a bit inspired by Beauty and the Beast. Yeah, very promising so far. Yeah, I don't think I have much else to add. Of course, there were, I think, a few typos still in the demo, but it is still just the demo. Yeah, I liked it. I would like to check out the full game later on. Yeah, that's it from me. As always, I'd appreciate if you shared your thoughts in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time. Bye bye.